My discomfort was obvious, but I wasn't prepared for it. In order to defeat them, I pinched both of their. Merely to reassure both them and myself, I used my hands. If you give it a go, I'd want to know how it feels. Similar. Ryan heaved a breath after a great deal of quiet, and at long last said, "No problem, but only this once, and we will keep it a secret so that no one can find out about it." Be aware that his tone was low, putting emphasis on its significance in relation to the room's limits. The only sound that could be heard was our breathing. As we started each action, our hearts were racing. "I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Grace Simon. Moreover, I would want to tell you a tale from today. My history, which continues to torment me each and every time. As I think about it, my heart hurts and I feel weak. The only person I can blame is myself. It's a journey that I really regret not having taken. Despite the fact that, as we all know, life is never simple. This tale started a great deal of time ago, when I was just 19 years old and lived with my family. Inside the breathtaking metropolis of London, there is a place full of allure, but yet has its own evil side. When I was younger, I believed that I had everything. We are all doing well, including both of my parents are highly successful. You should make sure to. You may subscribe to my channel so that I can continue to bring you even more entertaining information. Tales that are real, such as this one, and don't. Remind yourself to watch this video all the way through, as well as like the video since this narrative is. I anticipate that it will be really intriguing. To show your support, kindly click the like button. Help my father David, who is a very busy person, as well as my mother Emily, who is a businesswoman, designer of interiors who has exquisite taste. Even though they have very busy occupations, my parents remained committed to making an effort to spend time with my two oldest brothers, Lucas and I, as well as myself. In comparison to me, Ryan, they are 2 years older. Moreover, if I were to characterize them, I would say that I would think that both of them are quite gorgeous. In addition to charming, I have always been pleased to has brothers who are similar to them as the youngest. I had my parents do everything for me, and they never permit me to want anything, regardless of the circumstances, affection or monetary possessions. But the truth be said, I have always had the impression that their love is not, regardless of how powerful, didn't even come close to the affection that I was given by Lucas and Ryan, who are both. In addition to being my brothers, they were also my guardians, my fellow travelers, who are always there to. I need you to watch over and care for me because I am what I am. Had the impression that their love was distinct from. The thing about my parents is that they consistently demonstrating their concern via actions and gestures. My parents' affection was focused more on providing for me a life that is quite pleasant for me, but Lucas and I was more understood by Ryan, who accomplished more ways in which my parents were not always able to. They were able to recognize any time I was feeling depressed. In spite of the fact that I didn't say a thing, they were usually the first ones I went to when I needed help. Required to communicate and listen without interruption. When I was younger, I was subject to criticism whenever. At school, it was either her or picked on, and it was both Lucas and Ryan who were usually present at my defense. I can recall from the past a moment when my students made fun of me because of the dress. Both of us were in tears when we returned home. In addition to providing me with solace, brothers also went to the school in order to make things right. While they would not resort to violence, they did employ sharp. Those were formed by words and a chilly mood. Never again will bullies have the audacity to damage me. It seemed to me that they were constantly ready to always be there for me anytime I needed them to be. When you go back to the times when a gathering of the family, but I have always liked for them to be seated between Lucas and Ryan. They would give me firm embraces and make jokes about who you are. Would usually tease me when they were sitting close to me, for the reason that I was their little princess and felt it was important for them to look out for me. Forever, over the course of time, I started to have the impression that they had a love that was unlike any other in the world. In addition, they were the first members of the family to assist me in getting through the difficult years in my teenage years when I first began to experience insecure about my appearance. Ryan spent time with me, introducing me to the art of applying makeup, serving as a constant reminder that I was stunning. Simply, The manner in which I was Lucas allowed me to choose clothing that referred to me as the prettiest tiny, my sister in the whole world. They made me feel like a particular love that is unconditional in my perspective. In my perspective, my brothers were more than simply friends. My mental stability was anchored by them when the parents were preoccupied with their job and Lucas, and it was Ryan who made certain that I was in good health. They never left me alone and drove me to school, was able to assist me with my schoolwork and keep me company. There were times when I was alone. I was unable to sleep and I would wake up and bang on their doors. They would always make me feel welcome, regaling me with humorous tales or just by sitting here. The little things stayed with me till I fell asleep. Behaviors led me to assume that their love was genuine, a more profound meaning for me than what I was given, coming from my parents, but the affection that I have for them. When my thoughts were clean, they became the source of it is a narrative that would have been the biggest sorrow. Increase the amount of time you spend on. Explain that I am not certain that anybody will completely comprehend, but everything that we have to. Events that took place when I was 18 years old. The moment I mustered up the guts to alter my life. A portion of that recollection will be shared with you. I'm able to recall everything with such clarity as being the youngest member of the family. I often did doing foolish things without the fear of being punished. Sometimes I would be seen leaping into their laps. The alternative is to sit next to them as if it were the thing that is the most natural in the world. Lucas and Ryan was not just one of my brothers, but also one of my individuals I felt most connected to, my closest buddies, most conducive to comfort with a single warm summer. Later in the afternoon, I emerged from my bedroom. Sunlight was able to penetrate the expansiveness of the living room with a window that lets in a lot of light. The mood was calm and relaxing, and Lucas and Ryan were seated on the couch doing nothing but staring at there was a television program that I was unaware of observing, but both of them seemed to feel totally. As is my custom, I walked over while I was missing. I was scratching my eyes, but I didn't say anything except sneaking closer on tiptoes as I observed that none of them had approached me. While they had taken notice of me, I smiled. I leaped onto the couch in a cheeky manner and sat down on both of their laps in the parking lot. Lucas, who was taken aback, jumped, and Ryan chuckled. I am asking you, my younger sister, what you are doing. Currently, I am simply giggling and saying nothing, taken up a comfortable position on their laps. What was I doing, putting my head on Lucas's shoulder? I questioned. Are you two watching with such a high level of concentration? On the other hand, they did not respond right away. When I took a quick look at the television screen, I realized at that moment they were watching a romantic movie. At that precise moment, the film attained its pinnacle. A heartfelt scenario in which the characters are involved, had a passionate hug, and then went on to enjoy a kiss. When Lucas and Ryan were aware that I was there, they moved fast while glancing at the television. Becoming uneasy, Ryan grinned at the situation, hiding my eyes and speaking in an odd manner. Take a glance away, Grace. This is not the movie for you. As I wiggled free of his hands, I chuckled at the children. Now that I'm 18 years old, I'm no longer a child. I teased, my voice, which had a tone that was playful. However, I was truly curious on the inside. I did not conceal my eyes, despite his efforts to do so. An attempt was made to see through Ryan's fingertips. I continued to giggle as I taunted them in that situation. At that same moment, I unexpectedly moved my hand, while maintaining my equilibrium on Ryan's thigh. Unsure as to whether or not that was deliberate, but when his hand came into contact with something in his, savor the feeling of being both firm and warm. It caused my heart to rush and I jerked my hand back. I felt a mounting sense of panic in my chest. I was unable to get the courage to look at Ryan, as a result of Lucas experiencing an overwhelming rush of, I'm sorry that I stuttered so hastily, standing up and making a beeline for my chamber. I knocked on the door and banged it shut behind me. My heart was beating as I pressed my back against it, despite the fact that I had committed an error. When I was seated on my bed, I was unable to shake I was thinking about what had just taken place. Is that thinking too much about it, or had it been the sensation that Ryan's accident brought about? The song Pocket kept repeating in my head, driving my I had a flushed face and I was unsure of what to think. On the other hand, the embarrassment was. My mind was blown and I questioned if Lucas and Ryan would just laugh it off, but I was unable to do that. It's time for me to cease reliving the scene in my brain. Due to the fact that I had touched anything unsuitable, but due to the fact that IID made a line without being aware of the fact that it was I just realized for the first time that the barrier, which I had always thought to be the case between us, the unbreakable, was more frail than the rest of the. After the sun had set that evening, I had a notion. Taking refuge in my room for a short period of time. I was very hungry, so I decided to walk downstairs. I was aware that my family was probably waiting for me. Not just for myself, but I continued to feel ashamed because, before it was unclear if Lucas and Ryan had been considering what occurred, I informed them, myself, that maybe it wasn't as severe as I had thought it was, as I had the possibility that they had. Forgetting, I unlocked my door in a stealthy manner and walked down the hallway on tiptoes in an effort to avoid establishing direct eye contact with them as I got closer. I took a moment to listen to it in the living room. It seemed to be devoid, and I let out a sigh while I was relieved to learn that they were in the kitchen or somewhere else as I walked into the room. When I found it in the living room, I was taken aback. I was surprised to see that it was absolutely vacant. I halted beside the couch where I had been sitting earlier. I was attempting to find out what was going on before. I was trying to figure out what station was on when I heard voices. It was Ryan's voice that burst out from behind me. "Grace, what are you doing?" I jumped in surprise. And Lucas cried out in a loud laugh, exclaiming, "You look." In a state of surprise, I yelled like a thief. After turning around, I saw both of them standing down. Owing to the unexpectedness of their presence there, stopped my heart, and we all leaped at the same time. Both Ryan and Lucas were laughing at the same moment. As I was standing there with my chest in my hands, you two were both surprised and amused by the situation. I yelled out, "I'm almost dead," while attempting to, seeming angry yet unable to contain my emotions. "Laughter, what about you? What do you look like? You are engaged in something that shady," Lucas hinted about. While Ryan was patting my back, he raised his eyebrows. "Have a jovial attitude that you are not intending on. Do you have anything to eat?" I laughed along with you. Because of them, the discomfort that occurred earlier, I thought to myself that it seemed to disintegrate. If I had touched anything, it could not have been what it was Lucas and Ryan who felt it was differently. Would not be laughing in such a manner right now. Thinking brought me some comfort, and I made an effort to. I was trying to appear as if nothing had occurred to me, only looking to see whether anybody was present at the time. This is what I said in an attempt to divert the topic. "I am curious as to what you two are doing behind me. Is it your intention to frighten me?" Lucas shrugged. "I'm simply going to pretend to be serious with you. Wanted to give you a little bit of a fright, but Ryan, I should have known you wouldn't leap that high." With a chuckle, "Who would have thought that? You surprised me by jumping like that with your face." Was priceless, and we all ended up laughing out loud. Eventually, the tension dissipated when that occurred. When Ryan placed his hand on my shoulder for a minute, I then said, "All right, let's go eat the food." I nodded, "All of my family members are waiting for you," and smiled as they followed them into the arena. There was a kitchen where the whole family had. The smiles of my parents were warm and welcoming when I sat down at the table when they found me there. A sense of tranquility brought on by the warm light. Whilst the United States was having supper, in the talk there was a lot of laughing. The parents discussed their jobs and Lucas's situation. Moreover, Ryan would sometimes make fun of me by humorous jokes that I participated in, as well as before, it seemed that sentiments of humiliation were. Following supper, I assisted my family in fading away. First, Mother washed the dishes, and then she went to. When I laid in my room, I was getting ready for bed. As I was lying in bed that night, I recalled despite the fact that I was, events of the afternoon. With some degree of embarrassment about what had transpired, I no longer had feelings of anxiety or irrational fear. I gave myself a comforting grin and told myself that all was going to be well. Lucas and I were both certain. I think Ryan is still the greatest of the brothers. Could possibly have brought about, and I dozed off, tranquilly sure that everything was in the past. Despite the fact that it was not my room, it was theirs. partitioned by little more than a thin wall and even any and all noises, whether they come from a movie or not. Alternatively, one might simply allow music to travel through it. Morning I, who was notorious for sleeping in, woke up. I woke up around 7 o'clock in the morning. Among in Eunice. Typically early in the morning, I first assumed. I had awoken from a dream that I was unable to have take into consideration, or maybe the bright sunshine. I had been surprised by the sight of the drapes, but my realization came to me as I became more completely awake. Seemed to be a peculiar sound coming from the neighboring. It was between Lucas and Ryan's room that I had my room. Rooms, as well as our home, had been constructed in a classic design with thin walls, thus in the event that someone was playing loud music or watching television, it was not difficult for the sounds to reach the other. Ryan and the chambers that I was used to hearing, talking to one another or playing games, although this, a strange sound might be heard in the morning, was not very loud, yet it was noticeable enough to get my attention. At first, I believed it was necessary. Only a moment ago, they were enjoying a thrilling film. Alternatively, something similar, but after a few, I started to have the impression that something was incorrect. The noises were not what one would expect to hear. Noise from a movie that was random in its occurrence. Sometimes my heart beat slowly, and other times swiftly. An idea occurred to me as my heart rate began to quicken. I didn't have a thought that caused my face to get heated. I want to trust it, but the sound makes me doubt it. Grew more apparent. I was certain that it wasn't. Whether it was just talk or music, it was the combination of a sequence of rapid sensuous noises. With labored breathing, I made an effort to stop myself from reflecting on who I was at the time. But the more I listened, the more I was able to hear. I couldn't deny the fact that I had become convinced. The assumption that Lucas and Ryan were most likely being exposed to anything that is of an adult kind. A flood of humiliation swept over me, and I felt ashamed. I was perplexed as to why I was awake to find out this. When I feared it would stop, my heart raced so quickly, exploded, and I had the sensation that my whole body was on fire. I drew my hands up to shield my face as I was on fire, making an effort to push the improper away from my thoughts. This is a private conversation. Despite what I told myself, what made it even more stranger was able to hear these noises originating from here. Since we had been in their chamber, we had constantly been. I had no idea that I would be in such close proximity to it. This was a circumstance that I did not want to be in. Although I could no longer hear it, the noises appeared to. My voice was becoming louder, and I sat up in my chair. After that, I discreetly opened my door, but I wasn't there. I was certain of what I was going to do, but as a result of the anxiousness in my chest, I was unable to remain stationary for much longer. I walked slowly, walking down the hall in an effort to make as little noise as much as I could, but as I got closer to the door to their room was so loud that it seemed as if the walls were no longer there. I remained outside the room while we were separated. I was ashamed and confused when I opened the door. My chest was tense and my heart was pounding. My mind was a tangled mess, and I was aware of this fact. Were probably something that each and every one of them, but hearing it from Lucas and other people's experiences. What I didn't know was that Ryan's room was different. I couldn't decide how to respond, so I bit my lip. If I need to go back or continue with my journey. As I stood there, I pushed my ear on its surface, the door, in an effort to take control of my breathing. However, the cacophony seems to consume everything. There was a part of me that wanted to think rationally, retrace your steps and depart, but the other section of was unable to move away from him as he was sucked in. Suddenly, the door opened and the noises were heard. I took a step back in disbelief as Ryan stood up. There, his eyes wide with amazement, as if he had just recently been caught engaging in an activity that he shouldn't. I have stood there and frozen, blindfolded? Both of us looked at each other, unsure of what to say. In complete stillness for what seemed like an eternity. Suffocating and heavy was the quiet that prevailed. Ryan cleared his throat, making it difficult for him to breathe, as well as attempted to smash the neck of Grace, what are you doing? You are causing stress. From this vantage point, his voice was shaking, clearly uncomfortable but making an effort to remain cool. Despite his best efforts to conceal it, he scraped the He was not looking at me with his back of his head. Ryan's cheeks was reddened with excitement. Disgrace, I was not any better, my heart was not better. Was racing and I felt heat throughout my whole body. I kept my head down to avoid looking into his eyes and mumbled, "Oh, I was just walking by my house just now." Although words were not very strong, they were the only ones that I was able to get together at the time. Merely after then, the noise that was coming from inside the room ceased. All of a sudden, Lucas emerged from behind the curtain. Ryan, his face was a reflection of Ryan's expression, crimson and brimming with embarrassment throughout. His eyes briefly met mine and then he looked away, unable to face any of us in the eye. Away from the eyes, we were all standing there, confused of what to do. I would say that the tension between us was palpable and it seemed as if nobody knew how to break the ice. I smiled nervously and ran my fingers through my hair. While running my fingers through my hair in an effort to, I was only going by, so I tried to mask my discomfort. Trembling, I repeated my voice and continued, "Nothing at all, I'm going to go." I turned around swiftly and hastily made my way back to my room. Want to get away from the uncomfortable circumstance. At the speed that I could, I was able to sense their eyes on me as I was leaving, even though I didn't see them. When I got to my room, I looked back at the time. I leaned close to the door and closed it behind me. My heart is taking a big breath while I fight against it. Was going fast and I had the impression that I'd just found myself caught up in something I should not have been present throughout I felt a rising sense of humiliation in my chest and I was unable to quit thinking about the current situation. Due to the manner in which Ryan and Lucas gazed at me, following everything, there was an uneasy pause. Repeated over and over in my head, I continued to. The attempt was made to brush away the unpleasant ideas. However, the more I tried, the more powerful they became. I continued to remind myself that this was the case. Simply said, it was an unforeseen circumstance. A situation that nobody wanted to take place, yet I, without being able to help but wonder whether it had. Things between us were altered irrevocably as a result of. There was a knock on the door a little time later. My heart fell and I thought that it was him. Not my parents, since they are often not at home. I happened to show up precisely when they needed me to. Knowing it could only be Lucas or Ryan, I took a big breath, attempting to settle my anxieties with my breath before. Ryan stood there, opened the door and stood there, and seeming to be just as uncomfortable as he was before. His hands were twitching and he averted my eyes. "Embarrassingly, Grace, I am very sorry about that." In his speech, he explained what had occurred before. "It is not what you believe we were if you are gentle. You are only watching a movie and maybe it wasn't the right time." Yes, I did stand there for a little period of time. I could see the doubt in my eyes as I hesitated. When Ryan looked at Lucas, Lucas came into the room. While he stood at the doorway behind him, he seemed to be. His gaze flickering between the two of them was annoying. Ryan and I are attempting to locate the appropriate word. For a few moments, nobody said anything at all. For a little period, the stillness was dense once again, and I was aware that we were all attempting to find out way to go over this. I came to the realization that if, in the event that this discomfort persisted, it would make things much more difficult. Thus, I made the decision to break. As I uncomfortably smiled in an attempt to break the quiet. "Act as if nothing is going on despite the strain, I said, "Don't look so." Although I didn't intend you to. Lucas, I was simply going by and I was feeling nervous. The two of them shared a gaze as if they were. The act of speaking in silence. After a short pause, Ryan heaved a sigh and smiled as he did so. "I am returning gradually, Grace, and you are actually okay. You don't feel any discomfort when you do this." In an effort to comfort them, I swiftly nodded my head. "I am doing well. To tell you the truth, I am well. With regard to that, we are all feeling a bit uneasy." After that, in order to simplify things, I proposed, "Is it possible for the three of us to take a seat and, perhaps if we speak about it, it will help us get things straight?" Lucasimum and Ryan both seemed to be taken aback by my offer, but after a little pause, After some reluctance, they both decided that we began. As I went to my room, I sat down on the bed. To lighten the mood, I decided to create a joke. I gazed at Lucas and mocked him, which caused tension. "That movie was so excellent that you both forgot about it." A moment ago, Lucas laughed in an odd manner and His hands were covering his face and he was coming on. Please stop making fun of me, Grace. It's only that we. In all honesty, I was surprised to hear from you. My eyebrows were lifted in a fun manner, I thought. It was loud enough for me to hear us thanks to you guys. The uneasiness was alleviated when both of them chuckled. Away after some time had passed, my intrigue began to. Both Lucas and I saw a glimpse of the best of myself, inquiring as to whether or not I ought to reveal what had crossed my mind. After a slight pause at the beginning of the sentence, eventually I worked up the nerve to say, how about we provide something similar to in a shot? I was able to get the words out of the video before I was unable to stop myself, and I was uncertain whether they would respond, but I became aware of a flood of a sense of interest that I was unable to escape Lucas, and Ryan gave me a surprised look and said, "Are you?" Ryan inquired with a tone that was full of seriousness. Confused, I nodded, attempting to preserve my composure. I was only inquisitive about it from a serious expression. I responded in a low voice. It wouldn't hurt to try, right? Having the courage to avoid looking at them straight. No. Lucas's instant response, which consisted of shaking his. They both kept their heads firmly turned aside. My discomfort was obvious, but I wasn't prepared for it. In order to defeat them, I pinched both of their. Merely to reassure both them and myself, I used my hands. If you give it a go, I'd want to know how it feels. Similar. Ryan heaved a breath after a great deal of quiet, and at long last said, "No problem, but only this once, and we will keep it a secret so that no one can find out about it." Be aware that his tone was low, putting emphasis on its significance in relation to the room's limits. The only sound that could be heard was our breathing. As we started each action, our hearts were racing. Although I was cautious, I was so intense that I couldn't determine the amount of time that had gone, but I got the impression that everything in the world had went gone, leaving us alone while it was still there. During the day, sunlight was able to penetrate there was a calm and quiet atmosphere in the room, and we just lie close to one another without making any noise. The stress that I had was able to be breathed evenly. What had been feared had been replaced by an even more profound connection. We made our way together in the kitchen. We will cook lunch, and unexpectedly, everything seemed to be in agreement, as if nothing had occurred, yet indeed on some level. As far as I was aware, the barrier that separated us had. Once we sat down to eat, Ryan adjusted his position, greeted me with a grin and said, "Are you okay?" Replied with a grin and a nod, "I'm completely fine. The more I think about it, the more I adore you both." My remarks caused them to flush, but they merely held on. I am greeted by the warmth of my hand beaming at me. "I too have love for you," they remarked, and so we maintained our dinner with the knowledge that although the relationship has evolved, there was still a deeper bond that is the only thing that I regret. Remained silent but unambiguous between the two parties, and from that point on, everything seemed to us, in a manner that is distinct but not overt, a connection that was once pure and straightforward has crossed a line that was not apparent to the intimacy that we had previously shared, had developed, turn into something that is more complicated each time. When we were there, we peered into each other's eyes. Was a fresh comprehension for a more profound relationship that would not have been present in the past. Even if we didn't discuss it, we were aware of the bond. Who had not spoken was present, shifting we have dynamics between us that we couldn't have explained simply. However, despite the fact that the shift there is no denying the depth of our bond. Down, I was aware that what we had was not appropriate. Completed, the border that we had moved beyond was erroneous. We had given in to the demands of the younger generation interest, and although it did bring us toward one another, to a certain extent, it also made an impression on because to my conscience, I was unable to disregard the reality that we had violated some basic principle. Despite the fact that it was not our aim, rules, activities had caused a shift in my perspective of the globe, and that was a burden for me to bear. The anxiousness is still there in my life at times, having an effect on me whenever I think about it. At the time when the discomfort has not yet entirely gone, every time I look at Lucas or any of his friends, Ryan, I am able to feel the shift in the atmosphere. A stress that is not expressed but just lingers, just On the surface, we never engaged in conversation. In regard to what occurred once more, almost as if the pact to forget about it was made in silence. Make a move forward, but the manner in which they are treating me at the moment is. They are different. They are more cautious and softer. The manner in which they behave as if they are fearful of doing harm on me despite the fact that I am aware. For my part, I can't help but feel that they adore me. When I meet someone, I always feel my heart racing. Inside their eyes, there is a combination of. I've had feelings of both exhilaration and dread. Never before has the curiosity of youth been present. Brought us to this road, which was one that was full with feelings that we were not prepared to deal with. In spite of the fact that our connection is stronger. Also, it is more complex and I am aware of it. The truth is that things will never be the same again. A second time, when I look back, I understand how. Our behaviors were ones that were impetuous and immature. Curiosity and desire led to the crossing of emotions. A line the likes of which should have never been. While I don't have any sorrow about it, I am unable to dismiss the lingering sensation when it both plagues me with remorse and bewilderment. This serves to remind me that curiosity may. Sometimes they take us down roads that are harmful. It's possible that we didn't intend for there to be any. In the manner in which they did. However, they did, and now we are forced to cope with the consequences. Due to the repercussions that result from this. During my time of experience, I gained a significant. Despite the fact that it is natural, curiosity is not always deserving of satisfaction, particularly when it poses a risk to the integrity of this partnerships and the limits that must be maintained. Protect us from the limits of life, aren't they? The purpose of which they exist is to limit us. Safeguard us from making choices that we may otherwise. I occasionally feel remorse for not being able to. Maintaining a grounded position is the greatest option, thus. I would want to thank everybody who is reading this. I would want to provide some advice. Do not let. If you allow your momentary curiosity to lead you to make actions that have the potential to destroy the connections that you have held dear in the past. Taking action based on intense feelings, pause and reflect. The long-term repercussions of the situation. Especially powerful feelings are characterized by usually brief, but the repercussions they bring about have the potential to endure a lifetime. Appreciate the connection you have and the respect you have for the true love is accompanied with barriers that come with it. The sort that is long-lasting does not include any impetuous activities to demonstrate its might and power. It is founded on trust and reciprocity. Comprehension and accountability are both essential. The most significant thing I've accomplished in my life